I'd like to visit the time, Dr. Wilson, when you were helping President Bush with the State of the Union address. And in particular, you had grueling days, a lot of hours prepping. And when it was time for it to be delivered, you weren't there. You went home to your apartment in the dark, were listening in the radio. And there was a moment when the Congress applauded and you felt proud. But something that you said really stuck with me. And you said, I really enjoy being the low-key staff member who gets stuff done. Can you talk more about that? Because I think sometimes we don't, the unsung heroes are sometimes the ones that are really getting so many things done, but nobody knows, and they certainly aren't trying to take the credit.
I'm something of an introvert, and I've acquired extrovert characteristics in order to survive, professionally. But when it comes to where do I get my batteries recharged, I'm quite an introvert, and I really loved. And the same in international negotiations, being often the liaison, the back channel. And I did that in the Conventional Forces in Europe negotiations for the American ambassador. And in some ways, I think it might have been in the case of the Conventional Forces in Europe negotiations. I was on the American delegation here. I was in Vienna. I ended up there because for a bunch of weird reasons. And then they asked me if I would go there for 3 months TDY. And it's like, 3 months TDY to Vienna, Austria. Yeah.
Sounds rough.
So sign me up.
Right.
But I became a very junior member on the delegation, but I was the Office of the Secretary of Defense's representative. And walked into this palace where they were negotiating this between what was then the 16 NATO nations and the 7 Warsaw Pact countries. And the American ambassador turned to me and he said, during this, several times, I want you to sit behind me and to my right. And several times I'm going to turn and talk to you. And I just want you to lean in and answer. I mean, he wasn't asking anything substantive. And I just, yes, sir. But what he was doing was credentialing me in front of the other countries around that table.
Wow.
Now, I was very young. There were only 2 women in the room. The other one was from Iceland. And what he was doing was putting me in a position to be able to negotiate the back channel with several of our allies, and with this was 6 months or so, maybe a year before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So things were changing in Eastern Europe, and so I really have always enjoyed just that quietly getting things done, building consensus, finding the common ground, figuring out a problem. I actually have several coffee mugs that just say GSD, and the other side does say get stuff done. And I like that.
Yes,
and I like people who do that. And I think, those quiet, we probably don't say thank you enough to the quiet, hardworking people that just figure out how to get stuff done.
Well, I like how he credentialed you and actually brought that kind of credibility in that way as a leader. JD, how have you done that as a leader, champion some of those quiet behind the scene unsung heroes?
I'm not sure where the quote comes from, but it's something to the effect of, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit.
Yes. Yes.
And there's so much truth to that. In the sharing of success, right? As servant leaders, one of the things that I think both of us spend a lot of time on is to make sure that credit is shared with all the folks who behind the scenes, are doing the hard work to make things happen.
Right.
And very often, we're the recipients of the thank yous, right? And the gratefulness of an organization or somebody who's benefited from our work. But when you're at the very senior leaders, what you do is you lay out the vision, you create the environment to achieve that vision, but the hard work is done by so many others around you. Right today in the audience when we were there at Polaris Hall was Colonel Dave Herndon, right? So Colonel Dave Herndon, when he was Major Dave Herndon, was my aide de camp.
Yes, sir.
And I can tell you that there are so many successes that his fingers are on that he got zero credit for, because he was quietly behind the scenes making things happen. And that's just the nature of servant leadership, is making sure that when things go well, you share it. And when things go badly, you own it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this leadership lesson, watch the full episode by hitting the thumbnail here and subscribe now to get the latest episodes of Long Blue Leadership delivered directly to your YouTube feed or wherever you get your podcasts.